It's Monday of NFL draft week, and I'm ready to reveal my final 2026 New Orleans Saints mock draft. Like, I was able to grab two starters, one on each side of the ball, some significant depth pieces that should make the 53-man roster, but I couldn't close all the roster holes with just the draft. So, in today's Saints film room, we're going to break down my mock draft, and we're going to have to dip into some position groups that still have some holes and figure out ways to close them. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So before I unveil the mock draft, two things I want to say. One, I would have been willing to trade out of eight for a really big motherload of picks, and there'd have been multiple first rounders involved. Four trade offers, nothing even close to that, and I couldn't counter and get anything close to what I was looking for. The other thing is realizing that it's going to be either extremely impossible or 1,000% lucky if every Saints hole, every roster hole for the Saints gets filled in this draft. And I really wasn't even attempting to do it. I'd made a list of potential free agents. So if we don't get what we need, we still have a chance to get it in free agency. And so I had that in the back of mind when I drafted. One thing I didn't want to do is reach with any picks in the top 100 if I could avoid it. And also, after we discuss the picks I made, we're going to go into some rooms that were drafted and then take a look at what we need and some free agents that might be able to fix it. Without further ado, there it is. I'll make it larger in a second. But first, talk about number 8 overall. I took Caleb Downs. Ultimately, I have had a journey since before the NFL season even started, looking ahead to this draft and knowing we'd have a top 10 pick. I had Jeremiah Love as the best offensive player in this draft, and I had Caleb Downs as the best defensive player. And what happened tends to happen this time of year, just start talking about all these players, a lot of really good players in this draft, and you start talking yourself out of this guy and finding doubt in that guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 3, 4 months later, here I am right back where I was roughly the end of November, beginning of December. Scheme fit and love, scheme fit and downs. Tremendous football players. Kellen Moore production. Want to see it over a long period of time. You're talking about two guys that basically did it their whole college career. Getting Downs first overall, or not first overall, in the first round, eighth overall, excuse me. I think that's a big win for us. Impact player, again, perfect scheme fit, I believe. And I had talked myself out of him coming back around. He was available along with Bain, along with Mansour. That's really the top three available at that number 8 spot. In my mind, he's your guy. If he's there for the Saints, he's the guy. So when you're talking about Caleb Downs and you're looking at his film, it doesn't really matter if you're looking at his freshman year at Alabama, if you're looking at his sophomore and junior year at Ohio State once he transferred over there. You're seeing a consistent playmaker who understands defense, does have that high football IQ, really good instincts, and not only understanding of what the offense and what the defense is trying to do, excuse me, also what the offense is trying to do, can get himself in just situations to go make plays. And that definitely fits Brandon Staley's idea of a star. So in his career, he played 44 games, 14 at Alabama, 30 at Ohio State, 262 career tackles. Did have an 11.2% missed tackle rate, more or less average, but under 10, that's where it really gets good. But very much acceptable at 11.2. Thing is, in those career tackles, total tackles, he had 96 defensive stops, which constitutes a tackles that cause a failure for the offense. And you're talking about a tackle 0 or less yards, negative yardage, tackling short of the sticks, short of the goal line, forcing a fumble on a running play, stuff like that, and or after the ball is caught. But knocking the ball out, anything that causes basically the offense to lose when you make a tackle. 96 of his 262, 37%. One in every three tackle, he's making some type of big play. Coverage, 64.5 completion percentage allowed over his 3 years, 68.5 quarterback rating allowed combined over his 3 years. 6 interceptions versus only 2 touchdown passes given up. Pass breakups, I've seen numbers all over the place on the number he's had for the 3 years, and I don't know why, but I think it's safe to say somewhere around 12 to 15 is maybe the official credit, but I don't really know because I've seen some numbers as high as 20 and one as low as 7. I don't have a clue. But I know he's got some. Some of it's going to show up on this film, in fact. Um, the one thing PFF kind of tracking his pressures, give him 9 in his career, 2 quarterback hits, 2 sacks. Um, I don't know if that's also accurate. It seems like watching this film, those numbers should be higher. However, I do get that in the 3 years that he played college football, he played on defenses where uh, coming from the back end wasn't necessarily required to give a lot of pressure on a quarterback. So it just could be a product. You see most of what he did in this in the highlights. He just wasn't asked to do it much. Of his 2,489 career snaps over those 3 years, 2% of them came on outside corner, 3% on the defensive line, but at slot corner, 23%. Box safety, 35%. Deep safety, 37%. Basically, 95% of his snaps came in the areas where we're looking for the star, the position group for Brandon Staley to be filled with someone like this young man. There's no doubt about it. Even though there wasn't athletic testing, and this is one of the things I use to talk myself, well, maybe not downs, maybe we should go somewhere else. And all it took was just getting back and watching highlights of what I remember seeing watching this young man play. Saw an awful lot of him in Alabama, SEC type guy here, LSU fan, right? But you couldn't miss him at Ohio State. In any big game you watched, which Ohio State played a lot of them over those 3 years, you saw 2, or those 2 years he was there. You saw an awful lot of him. He made you notice him, and he did it with a very fair amount of athletic ability. 2024 returned a punt that's in the highlight reel that absolutely amazing and totally outstanding return. Some of his picks have been just freakish, the way he could get his hands on a ball. But more importantly, look, gives you coverage and gives you all the stuff you want from the secondary, but he run supports some of this like a linebacker. And in some of his footage, he's basically lined up as an off the ball linebacker, coming in and making plays, making stops. Think that's what you want. He's a starter, and he's going to be on the field an awful lot. And the great thing about him is, even if you want to break and go to a more 3 safety set, 3 deep, whatever you want to do, he obviously can bring a conventional play if you want to get him out of that star role. It's not really going to be a problem for this young man. Multi-talent, multi-dimensional, very good player, and he would be my pick if he's there at number 8 outside of Jeremiah Love, and he was. That's how we got him. Now, moving on to the second round, name very familiar if you've watched this channel before. We've talked a lot about Emmanuel Pregnon. I'll have his video on the end card, so get to the end of the video, click on it if you want to refresh it or if you haven't seen it yet. But basically, you're getting an older prospect here. He's going to be turning 25 during the season in 2026. He's a redshirt freshman at Wyoming in 2021. Played at Wyoming in 2022, both guard positions, worked his way up to starting at both guards at some point during the season. Caught the attention of USC, who came a calling. He transferred there. Played in 23 and 24. Basically became their starting left guard. And about a year ago this time, a lot of people would have thought he'd have been in the 2025 draft a late first, high second round possibility, a true plug and play starter at guard. Instead, he decided to go back for his final year of eligibility, went transferred to Oregon, tried to make a national championship run, made it to the playoffs. And if you watched any of, especially that Oregon Texas Tech game, with that ferocious Texas Tech defensive line, he held up well. Total of 51 games started in his college career, 39 starts at left guard, 12 at right guard. Like I said, a year ago at this time, had he been in the draft, he'd be in a very similar situation he's in now. Just to me, it's a no brainer. If he's there at 42, you don't do anything but take him. Kind of got the Cesar Ruiz problem solved right then and there, I believe. Moving on down, Ted Hurst. I had to trade up because when I took Pregnon, top five receivers basically were gone. Tate, Lemon, Tyson, Cooper, Concepcion. Everybody else was still there, and I said, let's see how far we can stretch it. Keep an eye on it as the draft was trickling down. That if receivers started going, I was going to try to trade up. It didn't take too long. They started going, made multiple attempts trying to get in there. Finally succeeded at 66 with a little bit of luck, or trading up with Tennessee to get 66. Gave up 172 and 73. More on that in a second. And for the most part, there were two guys there were at that point, Hurst and Bryce Lance. I would be good with either one. Just went with Hurst. He's considered a slightly higher graded prospect, but I don't know if there's much difference between either one of them. Um, Lance is faster. Hurst probably a little better pass catcher, but it's a what and what. You're getting a tall, fast, outside X type receiver, stretch the field from out there, ability to get up with his size and his hands, make contested catches, should be able to stretch that field vertically from the outside for Tyler Shuck. So I think that's a big get because right now I don't think you have that true vertical stretcher on the team, at least not one that's produced anything yet. So I think you have to add something like that to the mix. Other option would be the slot guys. Cooper and Concepcion would be two of them. They're long gone at this point. Zachariah Branch didn't make it. There's a couple other receivers later in the draft who are like Branch, but smaller, but just as fast. That yards after the catch out of the slot, where you can use them screens, short passes, and let them work for yardage after they've caught it, and still able to stretch the field from the slot, but not likely to play outside. They get the point. Like I said, receivers were getting thin. It was time to make the move. Got in there, got Hurst. But if it'd be Bryce Lance, I'd be happy too, because those two guys compare to their draft profile right now coming out of college, a few years back, coming out of college and heading into the draft. One Christian Watson's draft profile mirrors Bryce Lance and Ted Hurst. So I think you're doing pretty good with either one of them in the third round at 66. On the trade, what I was doing was 73, starting at 190 and trying to move up. Really weren't getting any takers. Got to Tennessee. They rejected 190. They got up to 172 and they took it. I honestly think it would take more than that, either multiple picks or moving all the way up to like giving them 132 and 73 to get 66. So from this point in the draft beyond, I think that's one of the things that goes, I don't know how reliable it was at this point. Taking a trade like that, however many other trades the simulator accepted along those lines, but it is what it is. That's what I had to work with. So going on from there, after taking Hurst, corner and edge. And at this point, kept looking at edges going, they're all bit of projects. And we'll get to a minute why I'm thinking at that point. I wasn't looking to grab the edge. I was looking for the corner because that's the other need. Backup center, there was nothing anywhere around that I'd be interested in drafting right there. So Julian Neal. Neal kind of in the mode of Quincy Riley, and he's not the only one. There's a probably 5, 6, 7, 8 corners still floating around at this point in the draft who are going to all fall into some category of, look, they have some work to do to become an NFL starting caliber corner, but they're going to show up with some special teams usage, some some depth that they can provide. You probably just don't want to have to roll them out there for long terms if you can avoid it, because they will get picked on and exploited eventually. And they all have different reasons. Julian Neal specifically, what he does well, he is physical. He's got elite physical measurements in size 6'2", 203, 9.5-inch hands, 33-inch arm length, and pretty good explosion with his first step. But he doesn't have real long speed. For a corner, I'm going to have to say the only 4.49 in the 40. So he's edging up to 4.5. Becomes kind of an issue in the sense that, and this is the knock on him, this is the thing that is brought up that you're going to have to work with to get him where you need him to be, is very good when he's physical, and he does what big physical corners do. They're going to get on you and try to get you off your route and tie you up, just with their physicality. Requires a lot of things, technique and footwork that has to go with, and that's kind of where he gets in trouble. That can get a little sloppy, and because he doesn't have the lower end of that 4.4 speed, or even as some corners touching in on the high 4.3, the catch-up speed when you get him in that situation is tough for him. So he is susceptible to giving up big plays. And it's basically, can you get him faster or get his technique just to be clean all the time where he's able to keep relying on his big physical strength to lock down coverage. Also, better in zone than man, and primarily that would make sense if you don't quite have the long speed and those you can't press those guys and keep them out of their routes before they just run past you. So there is that, but feel like overcomable, and most analysts say, yeah, it just may take a little time to get him where you need to be, but you can get him there within a couple of years. And if you get lucky, maybe he is a Quincy Riley and he cleans all that stuff up immediately and help you a lot more than just a depth piece at corner this year. When we get to the next three, they're more developmental depth. Bentley, bringing him in, I know what our tight end room looks like. Know the 4 names that are there, or 5 names, I'm sorry, that are there fighting for 4 spots, and we know who the top 2 are. I just don't know if you have a really good run blocker in there or you're developing one. But I know we got pass catchers all up in there. So Bentley or Burke from Texas A&M feel like, and they're both real close to each other right around in this range, and feel like you've got to grab one and bring them into the room to make sure you have that balanced room and a guy that's going to bring elite run blocking and elite pass protection if you got to keep him in there for pass pro. So I think one of those two guys at some point you got to bring them in. It's not like they can't catch the ball. They're just not the pass catchers that when you're looking at the upper end of the draft, Stowers and those guys that are going to be long gone by this point. But I think it's a necessary thing to bring in and at least have a look at and challenge some of the pass catchers. Can they provide enough blocking where you wouldn't need to rely on a rookie like this? No. Corleone falls into the special category, especially defensive linemen. This is edge and interiors, where the one-dimensional guys, no matter how good they are at that dimensional, seem to be getting pushed down the draft boards right now, or at least in these mocks and kind of in the analyst draft boards. So edge, we've talked about the Dante Tucker before, just a lead as an edge rusher, kind of worried about what is inside, not unlike David Bailey to a lesser extent. But down here, they're all packed up. And so it makes sense. And I was surprised to see Corleone here, but it makes sense. That's kind of their thinking. And I do not know if it's going to hold for the draft. But I think you're getting a really elite football player, not elite, really good football player at 150. What this team needs, the young, run stuffing, especially on the nose, can play two gaps, tie up your defensive line, wreak havoc in there. Good anchor, hard to push out of his spot. That's Corleone. Also did a video on him. Make sure he's on the end card. It's just the really lack of no pass rush scares him. He's going to rely on his strength in a bull rush, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, he doesn't. But I feel like he could still bring enough of a push for the Saints and jam up some stuff in offensive pass protection while he's anchoring the middle like that. Be mighty helpful for guys like Brian Brzee because that guard ain't helping, and that'll trickle on down to the edge rushers too, and help open things up for them. So I think he's a guy who's going to be in the depth chart on the 53 and could contribute heavily. Last guy, Travis Burke, offensive tackle from Memphis, massively huge, 6'9", 330, 40, pushing 40 pounds of just pure road grading strength, run blocking beast. Uh, Knock on him is a lot of work to do to be able to handle the pass protection as a tackle. A lot of feeling he would be best suited to kick inside to guard where more of his power comes into play because evidently he's got a ton of power. So developmental, bring him in, add him to the mix in the that we have going on as a reserve offensive lineman. Just because somebody that big and strong, maybe you can teach them the pass block, maybe they can play guard, or maybe you can get them just good enough at both of them where primarily they'll be depth piece. But what I'm thinking is, and this is mentioned in some of the analysts going, if you get him to that level where when you need to bring that extra third tackle out on the field because you plan on running the ball on goal line or short yardage or something. And I'm thinking, even if you're going to put him in a line in the backfield, line him up as an H-back and run behind him. Yeah, I get what the thinking is there because they're like, as long as he's moving straight forward and can use his strength, he's good. It's the lateral, it's the quickness of the edge rushers, that kind of stuff that gets him. So depth piece for the practice squad, but at 190, that's kind of what I just keep looking at going, I don't know if there's a real, nothing other than finding a diamond in the rough down at that point in the draft. So going into the draft, it's the Saints defense back depth chart. You find at safety, you have five of them there. You're thin at cornerback. Starters, Riley McKinstry, no problem. Yadam's really your only reserve corner, and he did not play well last year. One of the main reasons why Riley, as a rookie, was able to come in and take his job. So you need to add some depth there on the corner. One of the ways you can do it is free agency, but guys like Douglas, Hilton, who's primarily an inside corner, Diggs, you look at what is considered the top end of the list there. A lot of them are declining corners, either age and or injury related. Douglas had a bit of a bounce back year last year, so he would likely be the guy you'd be looking at if you went that route. Must mention, though, that in the past, more times than not, and last year we had an example with Michael Davis, the Saints have tapped into the cornerback free agent market and pulled, let's say, not necessarily what would consider top tier corners out. And while they're not studs for us, they were able to get on the field and help us a little bit. Again, see Michael Davis last year. So after the draft, which you've done, we didn't really have anybody inked in to play the star position. Now Downs has that and kind of completes. Your back end is complete, and you've added Julian Neal or any of the corners that kind of fall into his category, which is not unlike Quincy Riley last year. Needs to develop a little bit, needs to work on some stuff, but if he does that, can be a starting level NFL corner. And if he does it fast enough, you can get him on the field rookie year. Happened to Riley, Neal. Don't know if you can get him to starter level his rookie year, but it is possible. But it seems the consensus is you can get him to be a significant depth piece by his rookie year. O-line depth before the draft, huge question mark. Who's your backup center? Kellen Moore alluded to, well, we've got guards that can take center snaps. I'd like a legit backup center. We've been through that once. Don't want to go through it again. Ruiz, I think everybody's really looking at The one year that he played well was in a Clint Kubiak's very heavy wide zone scheme, and that's more wants to be more balanced. I think everybody's ready to move on from Ruiz. Your backups right now, you can rely on Richards and Reduns. Richards to handle the tackles, Reduns to handle the guards. They both did it last year. Redun's really a swing player because he can play guard or a tackle, so you can double dip with him if you have to. But you're going to need more than two essential backups in this offensive line. The reserves that we're looking at now, Simpkins and Sherman both got snaps last year. Not overwhelmingly great, but there's still a chance you can develop them. Saldivari, Wesley, Truss, Kilty, don't know how any of these are really going to factor in. But you may have some potential backups there that you can use. We just don't know yet. Looking at free agency, specifically, right guard, if you want to place Ruiz, probably Kevin Zeitler's the main guy. He's 36 years old. Tennessee hasn't re signed him, and as far as I know, he hasn't retired, although both of those might still be in the cards. But he would immediately come in, place Ruiz, because even at his age, he was still considered one of the best right guards in the league last year. Let's skip down to Ethan Posick. Kind of the same exact thing with him at center. I don't know if he's considered one of the best centers in the league, but he's been pretty good. He did have a stretch run his last year in Seattle and his first few years in Cleveland where he was. It's declined a little bit, but I think you'd get a Fortner type guy there if you brought him in. Greg Van Roten, combination of both. He's played left guard, right guard, and center in his career, started at all three. He would be more of a depth piece behind the three spots, but we give you insurance behind McCoy also that you could maybe he could pull off a Fortner if and when McCoy goes down. Drafting Pregnon in the second round, plug and play starting guard. Pretty sure he just takes the spot away from Ruiz, and I don't know what Ruiz's future is after that. Did not address any way, shape, or form backup center. So I think you're looking at bringing in a Van Ruten or a Posick. Outside of those two, I don't really know what's available. You might have to do like we did last year and make a trade, try to bring a guy in. Burke, he's a project going in with the other reserves. And I think going into mini camp, OTAs, the early part, you kind of have to work with those guys and see what you got. But I have a strong feeling after that, you're going to be looking at free agency, bringing in some help. Unless some of these guys on that reserve list show they can step up and back up would be a really good offensive line if you're going to roll out Banks, Edwards, healthy, hopefully McCoy, Pregnon, and Fuaga. Wide receiver depth chart. This really isn't a depth chart. Olave's your wide receiver one. Vele and Austin, I think Vele definitely, and Austin possibly could work their way into not necessarily being wide receiver two, but two of the receivers that would make the final 53 man. Spoiler alert, I'm losing patience with Mason Tipton. So clearer picture of what we've got going on. Got Polk circled out of the reserves because we traded for him. Now, granted, it's something like he's had 12 catches, 87 yards, and 2 touchdowns in his career. Didn't play at all last year due to injury, but we traded for him. So we're trying to tap into that second round potential that he had when he was drafted. If you look at him, he's very similar in size to Chris Olave, and his combine was 4.52, I believe. He's not as fast as Olave. So he's going to, I think, profile a little more to Chris Olave, not filling necessarily that game breaker role we're looking for. I don't think Valet and Austin are really those type of receivers. Tipton, we had high hopes for, and look, I'm over Tipton. Potential free agents that could bring some of that. I think the only one on the name on this list that really matters is Juan Jennings from Frisco. Samuel Diggs, you could put Nuke Hopkins in there, Keenan Allen, just everybody kind of after Jennings, declining receivers. And I would much rather bring in a rookie that could be explosive, pair him with Olave, probably Vele and Austin, and then whatever we can get out of Polk, Palmer, Means, Cook, Bell, Alfred, all those guys show potential. That's why the Saints brought him in and have kept them. And why we have so many receivers stacked up on our roster right now. Drafting Hurst being, and I think this goes no matter which way you go. Took Hurst, outside X guy, bigger receiver, contested catch, great straight line speed, kind of a game breaker that way. But even if you go the smaller slot inside, especially yards after catch guys, I think you're fine too. Either way, you have to bring that in. Polk's going to get a shot. Valet, I think, is solid. So kind of those three clumped in as the 2, 3, 4, however it shakes out, just to give them numbers. Probably one, or definitely one, probably two spots to look at. And I think Tipton's done. I think Austin should get a shot because 2 years in a row, he was an afterthought, if thought of at all at the beginning of the season. But by the end of the season, he was pressed into service and he played very well under some extremely tough conditions. He deserves his shot at least. And then the other six in the reserves, I think I believe the last spot, if not the last two spots on the roster, are wide open for everybody. And they're going to look at all these guys, and whatever it is, somebody step up and take these roster spots and help this team. All that fails. Jennings is still your primary free agent, but the problem with that is if we wait OTAs, minicamp, etc., before we make a decision, Jennings, I can't see him still being sitting there in free agency and being available. Really not a whole lot to talk about here. Tapped in the free agent pool, brought in Fant, Johnson, and Fant are 1 and 2. Mataval, Welch, and Mitchell Payton. If their names were shorter, I would put them all on one line. Probably two of those fighting for, or three, or two of those three fighting for the last two spots. Probably going to be a four-man room. And then just go ahead and throw Bentley in the mix. So you make sure you have everything you need in the tight end room. Because I'm not sure about the blocking, but Bentley's a really good option when it comes to that. Like we said, that's primarily what he is. Maybe you can develop him to be a little more assertive in the passing game. If you go the free agent route, I don't know if you're getting necessarily any better. And we easily could try to keep Taysom Hill here, but it doesn't sound like there's really interest in any more free agent tight ends or bringing Taysom Hill back. So I think, as far as we can tell, they're happy with that four-man room. I think it would be, especially later in the draft, somebody like Bentley or Burke or whoever, just go ahead and add them to the room. Make sure you have everything you need in that room. So the Saints depth chart for D-line was not able to grab an edge in this draft, mostly because I felt like not necessarily they were reaches, but they were going to be kind of a work in process project. And looking, I mentioned before, and I really think we should bring Cam back, and then he would be your edge that you get. But Bosa, Clowney, few other veterans are still available. They're all going to be one and dones, I'm pretty sure. But at least patch it together till you get to 27, when you're going to have a lot of money to dip into the free agent market, and then you can go big on an edge rusher that becomes available. So I think at this point, you patch it together, bring in anybody that you can bring in that you think is going to help. On the interior, I don't like any of the real choices. Most of them are older veterans. Probably the best one I don't have on the list because he's over 40 years old is Calais Campbell. But Reader, Daquan Jones, a lot of older declining players here left. The only one that isn't, and I've got him in red because there's red flags all over him, is Christian Wilkins. 24, played a few games, ruptured his Achilles, came back last year in 25. This is with the Raiders, came back with last year with the Raiders in 25. They were unhappy with this rehab process. There was some type of incident in the locker room that required HR, and the Raiders ended up cutting him. Nobody signed him. So I'm assuming those red flags are still there. And despite him, obviously, he would be the best option. Just don't think he's signable unless a lot of things changes around him. He solves a lot of problems for us. Depth in the interior behind Godshaw. Somebody is probably not going to make the team at that point. And if he were to take Godshaw's job, it could be Godshaw, depending on Boyd, depending on Ridgeway. I think Boyd and Ridgeway are the two that would be in danger if Corleone shows up here or anybody of his ability. Still a little light on that pass rush, especially on the edge. And so now I think it really, walking out of this draft, sometime Sunday or Monday, I think the Saints would really have to go look at those three names. The top one, top two being the guys that I would really focus in on. Bring them in, like I said, a one and done. Just give them the contract, pay them, and then we'll work on that big time edge rusher either next year's free agency and or the draft. So that's it. Wrapping up. Just waiting for the draft at this point. Couple things that happened this weekend, and I did notice it. I think it not really changed a whole lot in some of these mock simulations, but had its effect. First one is Friday, Jordan Tyson's workout. 18 teams there, and I think the real reaction is it's still a mystery because more than likely any NFL team that wasn't worried about any of that, it didn't affect their decision, I don't believe. And in teams that had worries about his medicals or some other stuff, I don't know if that solved their worries to the point where they're willing to move him up the draft board. I think he's a real wild card that can change stuff. The other thing is, in this, I noticed a lot more reactions in these mocks with teams, like I said, in the final mock draft I did for the Saints. Four teams wanting to trade up for eight, and that seems to have spiked up since the Giants sent Dexter Lawrence to the Bengals for their number 10 overall. So some type of reaction I think is coming from the draft because of those two moves. And then whatever, I think there's always the possibility of some trades happening on draft day or during the draft after the first round. Kind of send some impacts, but you hardly ever see them coming. And when they do, you know, I think that's one of the things that makes NFL draft weekend really fun is when those situations come up, and I'm expecting to see a lot of that. God only knows how it's going to affect the Saints where we're picking, but hopefully not on the bad side, the good side, because we need these picks to work out. So first time here, hit the like, share, subscribe. Feed the YouTube beastly algorithm. Make sure it's happy. And in the comments below, look, same thing as last time. Give me the ABCD. I'll probably even have the same question in there. Discuss this one. Let me hear about it in the comments below. Also, don't forget I'm going to drop a couple videos here of some of the guys we mentioned and did film reviews on earlier this off season. So I'll be back at some point during the draft, I'm sure, because I'm sure something's going to happen. So till then, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.